So, welcome back to another episode of the Disruption Podcast, episode 145. It's a little bit different this time. It's no other Baghdaddy.
It's Chief Olasoji in the building, baby.
It's your girl Moeezy.
Yeah, it's the boy Prince. What's up?
And if you're watching this, you can see that Daniel and Counsel are offset for the start of it. We've got a little bit of a different setup. We've got 4 guests today.
Yep.
I'll let them all introduce themselves first. Maybe we'll start with the Shoot girls.
This is Jerusalem from Shoot.
This is Rodase.
I'm Parwin from Foundation House.
Hi, I'm Christine from Foundation House too.
Awesome.
Nice.
And I guess the easiest way to go about this is, do you ladies want to introduce Foundation House and how this came about, and then Foundation House ladies can explain what they're doing as well.
Okay, cool. Just a brief introduction to Shoot. So it started off being Sagali's 23rd birthday. It was a really small-scaled event that he wanted to do with his friends. And then he had a lot of people around him that really connected him to different people, sponsors and all that. And then we ended up choosing to donate to Foundation House. And the CEO of Foundation House, which is Paris, he came down. He was really shocked by the whole thing. And he was like, yeah, we want to pledge 10K. And so we made 16K.
Wow.
And then, then after that, we've just been connected from Foundation House. They've been really supporting us. I was so surprised by the support from them, honestly. And then we got to meet Christine and all of them. But yeah, that's a really brief introduction.
Yeah, so pretty much what kind of started as a small basketball tournament with friends for a birthday party turned into this like large scale community event with sponsors like Foundation House. So it was really good. We really saw how much impact we could have within the community, and like it was just an amazing thing that we said, we can't just stop there. Like it's something that we can kind of just like continue on and like formalize proper connections with Foundation House and just further raise awareness and really provide resources for those in the community. Because we saw, families come to the event, we saw young people enjoying themselves, and it was one of like the first big scale events that we had since prior COVID. So it was something that we were like, this is really necessary within the community, not only to raise awareness, but just to kind of like create a space that was really inclusive, safe, comfortable for people of colour, really. And then so we'll go to Foundation House because we'll see I guess the impact that they've had with us, because we definitely couldn't have done all that we did without them and their influence, the resource that they have, even just the knowledge really kind of just helped us really kind of go through everything.
Awesome.
Thanks, girls. This is the first we've heard directly from you about your project as well. Foundation House has really grown over about 30 years, or just over 30 years we've been around. We're a torture and trauma service that supports refugee and asylum seeker families, young people, children, elders, communities. And I guess your project fits into our community capacity building projects. So we have different programs. So we have direct services where we do individual counselling, family work. We have a complementary therapies, natural therapies program. We do school support work, so we have workers in schools doing both individual counselling and support of children and young people, but also supporting school staff to understand the needs of refugee and asylum seeker children and young people. So the work we do is really broad, and we do have different regions. So our team in the West has been really key in the work with Shoot. And I think what you're adding to us, I think, you obviously thank you for the acknowledgement of the support the Foundation House is giving you, but we've really had a gap in terms of youth voice and participation. It's been driven mostly by workers and, adults. Yes, we have our clients, but in our project work, we haven't had young people leading the way. And it's just amazing and awesome that that's now happening through this collaboration with you all. So we're benefiting greatly from your lived experiences and voices as well.
I think, not enough in the past. Maybe we've tried and we've engaged communities, but I think we've got more room. We need to work closer with communities and the people that we work with to hear from you guys what the community needs. And one of the projects we've got going at the moment is the team that I work with at the moment. which is the Afghan Community Response Team. So we're responding to the mental health needs of Afghans who have been evacuated from the crisis in Afghanistan. And as part of our counselling team, direct service team, we've also got 5 community project workers straight from the Afghan community, from the different ethnic backgrounds, who are in the community informing our work and supporting our direct work with clients, which is pretty amazing.
And Parwin's our team leader of that program, which is really exciting as well, being from the community as well.
For sure. That's really cool. I guess just for both of you, how long have you guys been part of Foundation House individually?
Go ahead. That's really going to tell us show our age now. 9 years for me.
Wow.
So 9 years, and I moved across from our generalist team where I worked with children right through to adults, and then I moved across to a specialised team for children and adolescents and families, and I did a lot of outreach at schools. So as Christine said, as part of our work, we do go out into schools and we not only respond to referrals for individual counselling, but we support wellbeing staff as well. So we talk through trauma symptoms, how people might want to support students, what could be helpful in a classroom, for instance, that sort of thing. That's where, I've come through there, and then more recently jumped on board with our new team. So, I've been around for 9 years.
It's awesome.
I've been there 21 years. Started in research and group work, so we did some great research projects with refugee young people, following them over 5 years, looking at their settlement issues and needs. Moved into group work then, and after the group work moved into individual counselling. Did a lot of school-based work initially as well, also supporting and debriefing and supervising school staff. And recently, last 2-3 years, have been working with at-risk young people, so doing a lot of work closely with Youth Justice, with YSAS Drug Alcohol Service in the Southeast, working with some young people in and out of custody, doing some legal advocacy, going to court and really trying to help magistrates understand the complex issues of young people. And we're really lucky in the Southeast. We've had some great responses from magistrates who are trying to give therapeutic outcomes. And yes, of course, they have to put people on orders, but really trying to make sure there's adequate support for young people when they are released from prison.
Well, that's awesome. Like, I'm in awe of everything that you guys have literally spoken about, like both of you guys, in terms of like the work you're doing in the community, because it's not like you're waiting for someone to come to you and share the information. You guys are actually going out to different, communities, different places, and actually speaking to people, providing them with the information. Just in terms of like, mental health and the topic itself, it can be pretty heavy, I guess, the content, the people that you meet, the stories that you hear. So it's like, how did you guys get into it? Like, where did the passion for it come? And for you guys as well, why was mental health such an important topic to kind of, raise awareness around?
Please go
Should
ahead.
I start?
Yes.
I can briefly say, are you both people of faith, Christian? So I know that with my family, I think it was more not shunned down, but it's more like that's not very godly. That's from the opposite side. So I just, that whole perception and that whole mindset, wasn't really helpful, to be honest. But the community really, really helps, and that's what I thought. Like, now our shoot tournaments are really replacing what we had growing up. Like, we had church, we would go, but usually people that don't really attend these things and don't have people to really talk to, it can be really hard for them. So that
just
whole
jumping off that, like, growing up, the mindset towards mental health, even for us, like growing up, I guess even just people of culture as well, like culturally from a lot of third world countries, that's kind of the perception towards mental health. It's not really a conversation you have in the household. So we were like, for a lot of these young people, they're not having these conversations growing up, and we can kind of see the effect of that because we see a lot of people within the community, I guess falling victim to mental ill health and things like that. So we were like, through basketball, we're kind of raising awareness, like through a sport that everyone enjoys, and even like families that are even willing to go to, a basketball tournament, things like that. We're kind of trying to bridge the gap and to see how that conversation is really important, and how young people are really needing that conversation, especially with families who came to the tournament, like we feedback from them as well was like, oh wow, like we didn't realize like how many people in the community are really trying to address mental health. Like it kind of was awareness for them too, and we really feel like that's so important as well. Even moving on with future programs that we have set up, it's like we're really trying to bring that conversation not only in the community but back at home, because that's not what we kind of grew up with, and we see that it's so important, because if you start that there, a lot of things can kind of be avoided. So just I mean, there's other factors, of course, but like a lot of things can be avoided, so to speak. So we really kind of just highlighted that throughout the tournament last year, and like kind of moving forward, that this is something that we really see and needed in the community. So
That's awesome.
That's cool.
Go ahead. I think for me personally, I was reflecting on that and thinking, I don't know whether I as a kid was drawn to stories of suffering or I was looking for myself in those stories. I'm not sure, but I used to read a lot anyway, just to learn English really. But my family fled the war when I was 4.
Yep.
And we transited out of through Pakistan, so out of Afghanistan into Pakistan. And I think forever I've known trauma. Like I've known what it looks like. I've known that fear. Like I've seen it in my parents, or there's these conversations around suffering, but also of strength and of survival. And I think there were no spaces, like me growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s, like there were no spaces for us to have these conversations. Mental health was not cool. I mean, it's still, there's so much stigma around it, but it was definitely not something you talked about. And especially in my community, like you said, it was like, oh, you don't talk about stories that go on at home. You don't talk about if your parent's sad
Exactly.
or that, a parent might spend too long kind of withdrawn or, like just disconnected a little bit, or all those things all those cues that you pick up as a kid and like, hey, what's going on there? And you can't quite label it, but something's off, right? But you go to school and you don't talk about it, because in my community, we don't talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
And there's this whole concept of, like, what will people say? And in diary, it's mardum chimiga, what will people say? Like, so whatever it is, it's really intertwined with shame. So I feel like we can't talk about mental health without talking around shame and honour and guilt that's tied in with it all. So you kind of carry that as a kid. And I always knew that, like, even as a kid, I would be the one that listened to my friends' problems. So it would just be like, oh, yeah, I was probably about, I don't know, I reckon 14, 15, and I was like, oh, yeah, I'm totally going to be a counsellor when I grow up. And and I wish I had a counsellor when I was younger, but so like I kind of talk this language around, like counselling's cool, like get on board. And I tell the next generation, like talk to people, to find someone.
For sure.
Yeah, I think similarly, I think back, I'm a child of a second generation child of Greek migrants. So both my parents came here when they were young. And interesting, I never thought in doing this work with refugee communities and clients and trauma, you'll hear us talk about trauma a lot rather than mental health, and we'll expand on that a little bit more later. Growing up and, again, observing a lot, really looking at trying to understand the people around me, my family, and hearing stories at the dinner table, Dad talking about the village, the house in the village being burnt down and grandmother being held captive, and his father and brother running to the mountains to hide. Because my story is a migrant story, I didn't think trauma. And it's only through doing this work and over years that I realised the stories of many migrants and refugees, asylum seekers, include trauma, as do people's stories here who we know our Indigenous communities, their whole existence since we arrived as colonisers is about trauma. So I think for me it's always been a curiosity and understanding, similar, talking to friends from a young age, even within the family being the one that listens and observes. But in terms of then a passion for doing this work, I look back at my bookshelf from high school, and I was lucky enough to go to a school where we, the novels we were given were about culture and diversity, Indigenous issues, rights, human rights. So I think that's where my passion started. But I never chose this work. It really chose me. I fell into it, and I just feel really grateful for that.
Yeah. Cool. It's interesting you mentioned with like the school counsellors and all that kind of stuff. Like I remember maybe in year 12, I realized we actually had a counsellor at our school. And I was like, it took that long to realize. And then I was like, damn, like you have to be so down bad to actually go talk to him. And I was like, it must be like an extreme case for you to
Yeah.
need to go talk to him. And because none of my friends did, I was like, I probably would never kind of thing. I think similarly, the whole faith thing was
Yeah.
like, luckily, like at my house specifically, like it wasn't like we can't talk about this, but at large, it was kind of like
Yeah.
just pray about it kind of thing,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
But yeah, it's interesting because like now I look at it, I'm like, I don't know what I could have benefited off if I just spoke to the counselor about anything, or if more of my friends did. It's like, would less of them made bad decisions or whatever? I don't know. But on that, I guess, do you want to roll through the next question on
Yeah,
this?
I guess like in terms of that, because even just going to a school counselor, like recently I've just been hearing a lot of people saying, you know, you don't have to be going through like a, you know,
Right,
terrible
right.
situation to go and sit down and just speak, you know, it can just be like I just want to get things off my mind. Like I've had a bad day, you know, someone flipped me off in traffic, so I just want to go talk to a counselor and stuff. But then there is that stigma that is surrounded around going and, you know, seeking help or going and speaking to a counselor. Where do you think that comes from?
Yeah. Can I comment on the like your also sense of what is okay to talk to a counsellor about? I think again we really need to expand that language of mental health to well-being. Like it's once it becomes, and I think again in trying to educate people around mental health, we now have this very clinical idea of mental health, and it has to be on this severe end for you to access support and resources, rather than kind of early intervention, preventative, which would be to go and chat with someone because you're just feeling a bit uneasy about something or something's upset you. So I think that continuum of mental health, health of your mind and spirit and body, you know, it's really important that we expand that language and use that language of well-being. So if it's a well-being officer, you know you can go there for anything that affects your well-being. Grief, loss, you know, we all go through family issues and difficult experiences. So I think that's really important that. And I think schools are doing it a little bit better, but possibly still have a long way to go. That it's not just a crisis intervention service. It's really about having a safe space where you can express yourself and then you can be guided or supported for whatever's going on for you.
Right. So treat it more like a gym than a hospital kind of thing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we say that to young people. Why is it you will go to the gym and work out and look after your body, your physical self, but there's a complete neglect of the emotional, spiritual part of you.
Like we kind of have to look at it from a preventative model, right? So we want to be emotionally well.
Yes.
You know, just like we want to be physically well. We don't want to walk around with a limp if we don't have to. We get that knee fixed. We get, you know, go get physio. So it's the same kind of thing.
About the stigma, though, we
The
were talking
stigma,
about that before.
the stigma. I think one of the things is that, you know, mental health is a Western medical term, and that's the thing that, especially where we work with people who are refugees and asylum seekers, and they've come from other parts of the world that don't really fit this model. But when we look into cultures, and many cultures have ideas around emotional well-being, many cultures will have rituals and really rich rituals around, you know, healing and catharsis and, you know, moving through grief together and cooking for each other, sitting with each other, sitting in silence with each other, nurturing a new mum. Now we know what postnatal depression is now, and we've got a term for it. Our ancestors knew that a long, long time ago. They were doing these rituals for 40 days. In my culture, women get nurtured for 40 days or even 3 months, I think, you know, where people come and cook for them and look after them. And that's what it is. It's emotional well-being. But you get a family like that and you shift those communities to somewhere like here and we talk about mental health, and it just sounds like it's pathologizing people, right? And so I think we need to kind of acknowledge both. And some of the communities I work with, like even the Burmese community or people outside of my own community, where I've been like, oh, what did you do back home that helped you feel calm? Or what did you do for you to feel, you know, more happiness? Because some communities might not say they're feeling depressed like we do, you know, now. They might say, I'm just feeling bad or sad and just don't want to get out of bed. And so it's like, oh, what would you do back home to motivate you to get out of bed. And it's like, actually you did. You had an emotional well-being plan. You had a system.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's all right. I like that because that was actually going to be my next question is, do you think people experience ill mental health for a variety of reasons, but generally speaking, do you think the lack of community in the Western world, and especially as time progresses, technology progresses, all that kind of stuff, adds to that? And the reason I say that is because obviously I'm Arabic, like from Iraq, and there it's like you've got your church, you've got all your relatives in one place, you've got those kind of support systems where even if you're not necessarily talking about your mental health or wellness, you're always around people that are either in a healthy way distracting you from the negative stuff, allowing you to process the big ideas of life, especially in a at least for me, like in a faith context, whether it's the church, mosque, whatever it might be for you, it's like you are able to process the biggest ideas of life, and so all the other stuff of life seems a little less daunting, you know. But now it's like you bring someone out of that kind of context, they come over as a refugee or a migrant or whatever it might be, as well as the people that are already here, and it's like they haven't got those communities, they haven't got all their relatives here, they haven't got all that. It's like, are they more likely to then experience it?
Can I respond? Isolation is the worst. It's the biggest risk factor.
Yeah.
I think, and I'll come back to the word trauma again, because even in societies where you have the collective who can support, trauma is one of the main trauma symptoms is avoidance and disconnection.
100%.
So I think part of the problem is that when people have been through experiences of violence, persecution, discrimination, it disconnects people from their very self, as well as from each other. So within families, people are disconnected. From within communities, people are disconnected. And then as a society, we're all coexisting disconnected, you know, especially when there's been war or other types of traumas. So I think in terms of coming then to another country where there was still a buffer because you had the collective, either the place of faith or the neighbourhood, the village, square, when that's gone, of course, people are going to deteriorate as well. We have a framework at Foundation House, which is our trauma recovery guide. And what it does, again, with mental health is it's not a clinical framework of mental health. It's how do those traumatic experiences create a trauma reaction within an individual, a family, and a community. And then recovery, what does that mean? Connection. That's one of our main recovery goals. Restoring dignity, restoring connection, restoring meaning and purpose to life. So if you're disconnected from your space of faith and community, again, you're losing meaning, purpose, connection. So I'm not sure if I've answered exactly, but there's isolation is one of the key risk factors, particularly for young people. And some of the other questions will kind of, I think, tackle that about what to do.
Well, I guess before I'll let you ask the next one because I feel like I'm talking a lot. But before we go ahead with other stuff, you guys are mentioning trauma quite a bit.
Yeah.
What exactly, like by definition, is trauma? And then also, I guess in terms of Foundation House, like, what do you guys do with that definition then? Yeah.
Do you want to? Okay. Can I look at my notes? So what is trauma? Great podcasts out there. Great foundation called Blue Knot Foundation. If you actually really, for young people who are interested in reading about it, they are called the Blue Knot Foundation. They've got really good fact sheets. So when people go through bad experiences, like I mentioned, persecution, violence, lack of safety, loss, traumatic events, that creates a social and a psychological reaction within people, and that then leads to things like anxiety, depression, loss of trust, shame and guilt. So trauma is the effect of those things. Trauma is not, we say traumatic events, but trauma is the impact of those things within someone. And we like to, I guess, use the language of trauma symptoms and mental health symptoms rather than put someone in a box and diagnose them, you're this or you're that. So helping young people in my work and in our work to really identify what is going on within you, everything from poor appetite to disrupted sleep to nightmares to intrusive symptoms. You know, you're seeing things, you're hearing things, you're vaguing out. The more I talk to young people, it's called dissociation. There's so many people that don't know what dissociation is. No one's ever told them that word. And when their mind just disappears for a few seconds or minutes or longer, and other people think they're disinterested or they're being rude. And it's like, no, they're actually not quite here at that point. So helping people understand how trauma impacts on the mind and body, because that's the other thing we've focused a lot in psychology about the mind. And now there's a lot of somatic therapies where it's also about how does the body store trauma and remember trauma. So, and then there's things we do really to help support reduce symptoms. That's one of our main goals, is reducing those symptoms, but also building people's capacity.
I think it's, just another thing I've been recently thinking about is that we talk about really significant adverse events as being traumatic, but we don't talk enough about the things that might actually, people might be disregarding or minimising within their own families or their own context and their own lives. Like, the event doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be so significant. It kind of goes back to what you were saying, Noor, before about, is my problem big enough to go to a counsellor? Is my trauma big enough? Then we start scaling, and we shouldn't do that because trauma can be anything. It's an adverse event, and it's your body's interpretation of that event. So that experience lives within you, and it's so subjective. So how someone else has experienced, you've both gone through the exact same scenario, how they've experienced it might be different, how they're presenting might be different, how they're functioning every day might be different to how I'm functioning, with the exact same thing. So one of the examples is something like financial difficulties. If a family is experiencing financial difficulties, what that child is hearing in the stories between parents that we don't have enough, or that there's money short, or things like that, that's a traumatic experience. It's financial trauma, for that child, which then can have this impact of how that child might, interpret the use of money, interpret how they might work. All these, it'll play out.
The other thing also, it's what you don't get. And I was just reading that recently, so thank you for reminding me that trauma isn't only what happens to you, but when your basic primary needs are not met. So as an infant, and the more I talk about this with some of my young people who feel quite frustrated that their parents don't understand them or are not attuned to them emotionally, well, we revisit what was happening to your parent when you were born, what was happening when you were an infant. They were traumatized. They were trying to survive. So they were either dissociating or they weren't available to to be attuned to your emotional needs, which you then experienced as abandonment. So that's a trauma. Abandonment in itself for an infant or a toddler is a trauma. So there's so many fascinating, kind of interesting things that are invisible. And when we start to put the pieces together, I think it helps people to really understand how that then makes them feel unsafe, how they feel unseen, unvalued. And that's what trauma is, a lack of safety and a lack of self kind of value. That's what it results in.
When you guys were just speaking, and I like the last point you guys brought up, because I even just was reflecting on my own life, and I was like, definitely growing up, and you girls were touching on it as well, where it's like at home I didn't have that safe space to, tell my parents I actually do feel abandoned, because you hear that constant where it's like you have a roof over your head, you're being fed, you've got clothes on your back.
We did everything for you.
We're doing everything for you. We're just not showing you what you want, why are you complaining for? So it's like when you're constantly hearing that, it kind of puts you in a spot where it's like, okay, my parents went through worse. When I was born, they were in a war-torn country. They tried their hardest to try and bring me here. So why am I complaining? Like, what do I have to complain about? I wasn't running in the streets with no shoes on or anything like that. Like, I'm pretty good. So it's like, it's pretty crazy that you bring that. And I was even just saying, in terms of that then, How do you now try and, as a young person, go from a space of not being able to speak about those things? Because I think it's the comparison as well, where it's like you're comparing your situation to what your parents, went through. So it's like, how do you now close that gap and, be able to have those conversations with your parents? Because to them, it doesn't exist. It's like, you live a great life, you're happy, you're healthy. Why are you complaining? So it's like, how do I now bring about that conversation to someone who doesn't understand?
Yeah.
And just before on that, is it fair for your parents to go like, your life is better than mine, so it is hard to see your life as not good right now, But yes, sorry.
Is it fair? Oh, I think I'm going to park that one.
I'm not. I'm going to
But,
be like, it's not fair. I want you to
well,
answer that. No, I'm always aligned with young people because
Yeah.
I think the older generation, I understand though, it's what they do is there's denial. It's very painful, I think, for parents and elders to see their own flaws and what they haven't been able to do because they have done a lot and they've tried their best. And so I think it is about how do we take away shame and blame on both sides,
Yeah.
where
Both
children
sides,
aren't blaming parents and parents aren't blaming
Right.
children, but that we understand that trauma has impacted everyone in different ways. That's kind of that's my thing, and I just keep pushing
Yeah.
that with older
Yeah.
people in communities.
But I think it's
yeah,
around how
please.
those needs are articulated as well, right? Like when parents are communicating that, and I think as we can do that better as young adults, we can start to see that inner child in our parent as well. What are they actually trying to say, or what's like we can see their trauma or their grief or their loss when they say those things. So I think it can help kind of. It's not fair that your subjective experience, I guess, isn't fair, but you can kind of still give space for but what's my parents saying here? What's
Right.
the actual message? And that's where we can all bridge the gap a little bit, where if we start to understand them a little bit better, we can start to advocate for ourselves better.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what I did. I think when I started to understand my parents better, how I talked about myself shifted.
Yeah.
Because I could then go, oh, I totally get, like this happened and whatever. I know that was really hard for you. Like I can imagine, whatever. I'll give an example and then go back to me. Like let's talk about me now, and you can kind of do that. And it really, I feel like it can open up that door for conversation.
Yeah.
And it really varies in families.
Yeah.
I think,
Yes.
again, when you look at trauma, it can really damage families. We see family violence, we see a lot of conflict, both verbal and physical. So repair has to happen. And I think if there's no repair, then these conversations aren't safe. And
Many
people, again, are very disconnected. So, I've got a young man who is living with an older brother who's trying to be supportive. And he says to me, why don't we even talk to each other? So they'll go home and they don't greet each other. So it's like we have to encourage connection
Right.
at the really basic level,
Right.
and then we can move to these conversations, which are more personal, more sensitive.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I was even gonna just ask you girls as well, because we went down to the event and it was actually amazing.
great.
The way you guys
Yeah.
ran it. Sorry, it was great. Everyone really had the heart, and you could just see it as well. So and it was run by like a lot of young people too.
Yeah.
So for you guys, how are you guys, bringing that conversation about? Because I know you mentioned before, you never had that space to be able to, speak, and the community just wasn't there, and it wasn't really a thing. So it's like, how are you bringing that in now?
It's all yours.
Okay. I think, I guess bring our own experiences at home and things like that. We really saw how important that was. And even kind of jumping off what they said about like the approach that we take with our parents as well. Because even like personally for me, like I can see the trauma that my parents haven't even dealt with. So it's almost like I'm dealing with trauma that I grew up with. But it's like, how can I now expect them to understand when they haven't even dealt with theirs? So just kind of, I guess with the event with Shoot to Shoot, we mainly wanted to kind of bring, because we invited families, we invited like young people, we invited their siblings as well. Like it was a whole community thing that we kind of wanted to bring about. And with basketball, we knew that like a lot of people in the community love the sport. There have been tournaments before. despite being shut down and things like that. But yeah, like we knew that was, we could attract the community with that. And so through that and through, joining with Foundation House, having people from Foundation House at the event, things like that, we're creating a space where the conversation can kind of like arise again, whether it is with parents or young people or just like, Sagali, for example, speaking on it towards the end, like for the final. Like just kind of using that space, we thought that, it was really important just to push the conversation out again. And obviously through that, we're going to continue to kind of like rally off, the hype that we kind of had with the tournament and bring that into like schools now and things like that, like future events, a future tournament as well. Coming back November, guys.
Yeah.
So you already know it's gonna be live. It's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be bigger than last year. But kind of just using all that momentum and engaging more conversations and just like involving parents in that conversation as well, because parents also love seeing young people enjoy the sport. Like we saw so many families, we had a dedicated section just for the parents to see, so they could, see how important it was for young people to kind of interact with each other, have that connection in the community, and just kind of observe how important mental health actually is, or emotional well-being is for us as well, like as young people. And I guess we got a lot of good feedback with that, so essentially just kind of pushing that forward now as we go on with the other programs.
Something to add is that I think Shoot definitely does. Sorry, I keep on hitting the table.
So good.
Shoot really does want to initiate the conversation with, the young people and their parents. As Rodase said, like when Sagai was talking briefly about our purpose, I think it does drive some people to have those conversations with their siblings at home. Now that we're starting a school program with kids, that's what we are really trying to push as well. And also, if someone is trying to have that conversation with their parent, I would hope everyone's parents, like, their best interest is to look after us. So I think setting the tone and making it more natural and inviting, similar to what you were saying, would really, I don't know what I'm saying right now, but it would,
That's cool.
do the
I
job,
think
yeah.
it is something kind of special, especially I think with ethnic people. It's like, because this doesn't get talked about at home, it's kind of to me, it's a very smart way, like the way that Sagali set it up is like, bring your parents here. One person talk to all of them at once.
Yeah.
Hopefully they go away and go, yeah, these kids might be struggling.
Yeah.
Maybe I should think about this stuff. Maybe I should have these conversations with them. And then like for the kids, kind of like, hey, hopefully my parents clock something while they're here as well. To me, it's a very smart way of going about it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because I feel like, I don't know, do you guys think the conversation is had a lot, or do you feel like it's not had enough?
I think there can never be enough conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that we don't expect from that one event that they all went home and parents sat the kids at the table and were like, hey, let's talk about mental health. I don't expect that to happen, but I think that it's just like the repetition, like that, because I know my parents, for example, they're hearing about mental health more and more as well, like in the media, like with young people with school, like newsletters coming home, like it's just a topic more, like it's coming out more often. Yeah. So I really feel like just with more, like with the repetition and stuff, they can understand that, this is our children's well-being, like this is young people's well-being. So hopefully that kind of like continued conversation kind of just, I guess, gives them more of an open mind, because I know that for sure. I know that, like, my bad. Because I know that, one-off topics, like events are not going to really bring dramatic change, but it's just like continuing it.
To briefly touch on that though, as I said, like growing up, mental health wasn't even a conversation, but I can definitely tell the difference now with my mum. She's very engaged, and you can tell that it's definitely changing the narrative, for sure.
I think it's interesting. Sometimes if you kind of got relatives visiting and you listen to the oldies talking, and then you're like, oh, they have been listening.
Yeah, exactly.
They're talking about stuff in their own spaces.
Yeah.
But again, like we said before, we want to bridge those gaps and have those conversations together. I had this beautiful experience of an Uber driver who drove me here today. Eritrean man. We spent the whole 35 minutes talking about these issues,
That's
you
cool.
know. So I think we can all create spaces and have these conversations kind of everywhere and anywhere across those generations.
And across generations, across genders, like we need to be having them like intersectionally. Like
exactly.
It's not young people to young people alone, but us with young people, us with older people, and just bridging the gaps everywhere. And I think we can never have enough, because there's still so stigma.
Mm.
And one of the stigmas I think we probably didn't mention before, I think, is these concepts around like, you know, kind of associating with mental illness or mental health with like being broken or unfixable, or
Yes.
these ideas that, you know,
Damaged.
damaged.
Yeah.
These ideas that there's no way out of it and it's somewhat permanent.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, people like mental health literacy, we've got a long way to go across
Right.
communities because we need to keep dismantling all of the stigmas
Mhm.
and all of the shame that we carry within our communities.
Yeah, and the myths and the, you know,
that
the
they keep,
misinformation that exists around different mental health presentations. People don't have basic kind of physiology knowledge, brain development, brain functioning knowledge. Something you said though, Rodase, before was really beautiful around, I think young people have more capacity and courage to have these conversations with their elders who don't have that capacity. So I think, that's where there is hope ahead.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
Definitely is hope. And I guess just to wrap it up for us, what do you guys hope the partnership between the two organizations will become?
Ongoing. Funding
Yeah.
is
Of
our biggest
course.
nightmare. You know, if these amazing projects begin and funding stops and projects
Right.
stop.
Yeah.
So I think it's how to then make projects sustainable.
Yeah.
Even if
Long-term.
that project comes to a close, how do you carry that work on but still have the support you need? And how do we then still have input and not just go back to our old ways of, you know, creating projects without the input of the young people themselves.
Yeah, Foundation House has really put us on a pedestal and gave us resources, financial assistance, and we can't even imagine like going back, like doing it without them. So 100% it's ongoing for sure.
Yeah.
Just keep asking Paris for more.
Well, like she said, I think that we wouldn't have been able to come to where we were now because we
Yeah.
had the ideas, we had the voice, you know, we had the representation, but we didn't really have like, you know, the understanding of how we can actually go about this and everything like that. So they really gave us the tools that we needed, and we appreciate it so much. And
Yeah, honestly.
we have a strong connection, I think, because we do have future things coming out. You know, they've helped us with funding, they've helped us with how to kind of go about it, like all of our ideas into like the future projects that we have left to go. So I think it's a tie that cannot be broken.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
One quick one before we switch over to Daniel and Carlos. Do you two feel like you have any trauma from hearing so many traumatic stories then?
Good question.
Look, I wouldn't say I have trauma, but I'm definitely triggered.
Right.
I think that in the work, the content is so sensitive and so difficult. And when you're in this work because you want to feel for people, you actually probably have a, you know, natural ability to be, you know, empathetic and to feel for people, and you're in it for that reason.
Yeah.
So I think when you're a heart person going into the work,
Yeah.
you're going to feel a lot.
Yes.
And then, you know, you've got your own stuff, you've got your own childhood. We've all, you know, got some sort of, you know,
Something to deal with.
I don't want to call it baggage. I hate that word, but you've got stuff,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and so you're sitting in session often with your own stuff,
Yeah.
you know, and so it's like you've got to acknowledge that that stuff's there, and it can just spike up like with one disclosure from a client, and so it's really part of the work I've done when I started when I was much younger was to have these conversations really openly with my supervisors and use supervision spaces really well, like talk about if I'm being, you know, triggered or the work's bringing up stuff for me, because you have to keep working on yourself when you're a counsellor. You have to keep doing that work alongside it.
And you're trained. I think
Yes.
that's the
Right,
difference.
right.
When you're a friend trying to be
Yeah.
a counsellor, you don't have the supports around you. You also don't have the training. You don't
Yeah.
also have an understanding of what boundaries are. And I think, you know, when you work in the field, you've trained for it, but you also have the support set up in your agency. I think, though, with young people supporting friends who are really either in crisis or who they can see are not doing well, I really suggest they bring in someone. Don't ever feel like you carry that on your own. It is too much, and it is too much of a responsibility to have kind of someone else's safety or risk in your own hands.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. We're having too much fun here, so we might let Daniel and Carlos get in on this episode real quick.
I was like, when am I going to join the fun?
Doing a tag team like we're playing WWE or something right now. But we're here. No, honestly, you guys have been having some awesome conversations, and some really interesting things of like and like concepts and things have been coming out of all you guys have been talking about, and it really looks like this is a meaningful partnership, not just something for face, for people to just see this is another, like you mentioned, another great program, another great framework that comes around and then gets swept under the rug because the heart isn't really there behind it to keep pushing. But I think in line with that, it'll be interesting to hear like what has happened so far with like the funding or the support that you guys have received from Foundation.
Because it was 16 in total, yeah? You mentioned
16,000,
Yeah.
yes.
that we raised.
Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, what have you guys been able to essentially like do so far with the
With the money?
with the money at this point? Yeah.
We were really brainstorming on what we should do. One of our options were to give people a free therapy session. However, we wasn't sure if we were able to cater to everyone. So we were like, I think young people really need to be looked after. And we were like, all right, let's just do a school program. Let's just try to target as many schools as we can throughout Melbourne. We're currently doing 2 at the moment in the west side. And this is a part of it. So we are also doing a social media campaign. We're trying to spread the word about mental health, getting the information and advice out there through the podcast, reinvest into the ecosystem, into you guys as well. We've also selected a few artists, creatives to do their own thing, and we'll all post them very soon. It's pretty much reinvesting.
Somewhat like providing the platform for it. Just over what you were saying, and then also in the future, we do, like I said before, have the tournament coming up again. So kind of like doing smaller events leading up to like the big tournament in November. So kind of our money kind of reinvested back into the community and into like focusing on young people and how we can best address mental health through these different basketball, sport or creative platforms. Yeah.
Our main thing was to make the information accessible as possible. So we thought podcast was the main thing as well. Yeah.
I hope the audience didn't hear that. This guy's stomach.
I'm so hungry. But lucky, thank you guys for the muffins. Well, I've been eating in the background. I was also going to say, like, being educated in mental health makes it such a difference in terms of how we approach it, not just with ourselves, but also with our friends as well. Because I realized I had the wrong approach, when my friends around me were suffering. I thought I could do it. But obviously I started to educate myself a little bit more in terms of how can I actually help the people around me, right? I want you guys to talk a little bit more about how do we help those people.
Yeah, beautiful. Do you want to start?
I think one of the reasons sometimes young people might jump into wanting to help straight away, aside from wanting to obviously help their friend, is it can sometimes be a byproduct of intergenerational trauma in itself, that sometimes we've developed coping strategies to step in. We've become a little bit like the carer in the family, or we've been a bit parentified. We've got an over-endowed sense of responsibility and worry for others. And so when a friend's in crisis, often we might want to go in and jump in and help out. So sometimes it's just really helpful to just check in. Like, am I helping because I'm anxious? Am I kind of overreacting, to the problem, and just pausing maybe and kind of thinking, okay, like, what, is it about me? If it's not, acknowledging what's going on within you, and then asking, I think, your friend, what would be helpful for you? I think it's always like we talk in our work, we talk a lot around being client-centered, asking our clients, what their needs are and what would be helpful for them. I think we have to do that with each other in our personal relationships, whether it's our partner, whether it's our friends, what do you need from me right now? What would be helpful? Would it be helpful to take you to a doctor's appointment? Right. Would it be helpful to, those kind of things? And they might just need you to be that silent, accompanied buddy,
Yeah, it's exactly what I was thinking about the checking in. I mean, isolation is what happens. People shut down and they isolate, and that's where the risk is even greater. So just constant checking in, whether it's a message, a call, even if they don't respond, and then again, not taking that personally and creating drama out of that, but just making sure, that you check in. I think if you're really worried about someone, it's really about being transparent with them and saying, I need to keep you safe. I think if it gets to that point where we think our friends are suicidal or they're self-harming, that like we would do with a client, we would say, I want to do something to help keep you safe. How about we go to emergency together or to your GP? Or I guess I think about where is a safe place or a safe person. So if they're at school, is there someone at school? Is there a teacher? If they're at uni, the same. If not, is it the GP? If not, emergency, you know, that you basically go with them, like Parwin was saying, or you just share info, that you just send them a text that says, here's the lifeline number, or here's suicide callback number. There's a lot of resources online. And again, it's just a reminder, but the message there is, I care about you, I'm worried about you, but I'm also giving you choice. You know, I'm not forcing you. If the risk is imminent, you do have to make that decision about whether you will act even if they're asking you not to. And we have to do that sometimes with our clients, but we will say, I'm going to call the ambulance, or I'm going to call so-and-so, your family member, because I am worried about what might happen to you tonight or on the weekend. Yeah.
That's so powerful. I really like that. What do you need? You know, it's questions that we don't ask young people. I also like what you said in terms of, let's go together, let's do this together.
Yeah.
You know, those could really, really make a difference.
Yeah, I'll drive you, you know.
Yeah,
jump in the car with
100%.
Mm.
me, or let's jump on the train and go down.
I think the key is to stay connected.
100%.
Like Christine said, like isolation, it just keeps increasing risk. So staying connected, texting, it's so important for them to just know. So if it's going to take a day or 2 days for them to come out and reconnect with you, you know, that relationship is so important.
I think the hardest thing, which many people have lost friends and family and loved ones to suicide, is they're not blaming the self. We can never, if someone has made that choice and decision, often they don't tell anyone. There aren't indications sometimes. So it's the most painful, I think, and traumatic loss that people experience. But we also have to be careful not to then blame families, friends, because people have agency over their life and to choose to live or die. We just do everything we can to keep connected and to bring in resources. So again, don't ever hold that on your own. Even if you need to call a professional and say, or call one of these helplines and say, I have a friend who's in this situation, what would you suggest? Like we do secondary consultations all the time, calling and finding out don't hold it on your own, it's too much.
Yeah, I think sometimes we forget that we can just actually pick up the phone and
Right.
call and say,
Right.
hey, what can I actually do?
Yeah.
You know, there is a lot of resources available there.
I think a question kind of in line with that then as well is at what point, because we do take a lot of things on for other people as well. When we do become that shoulder, we do become that kind of soundboard that people can bounce just what they're feeling off, right? At what point do we now have to also now kind of look after ourselves, or where do you... Yeah, how do you balance being able to look after your own emotional well-being, your own mental health, as well as now being that person for someone else at the same time?
Boundaries. For
All
ourselves,
about
like we're teaching or we're trying to help guide and teach our young clients, but we are constantly checking our own boundaries.
Yeah.
I think something that was said before, I think, Parwin, you said, you have to know your own capacity. Yeah. If you're struggling with your own things, you're not going to be the best person to be doing that support. Bring in someone else. In terms of if you are pretty resourceful and things are going okay for you, again, do it, but bring in someone else, you know, share it. What is it about the village? It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to look after a person as well. So always multiply the support, bring in other people. That then helps you maintain a boundary because you don't have to be the everything for everyone. Set actual time limits and your private time versus even your sense of community time or friend time. Time when you're not available to other people, where you literally are not giving. Because I imagine everyone in this room is a giver and a nurturer and a carer. And so it's like, all right, so when are you not available?
Yeah.
You have to build that into your weekly routine.
And boundaries are harder now, I think. Boundaries are harder in so many ways with, you know, social media, and we're connected in so many ways, yet also disconnected in a lot of ways, you know. So you're kind of like texting people, and then they might disclose something through a DM or whatever, and you're just like holding that weight and the depth of that. Oh, is this person going to be all right tonight because they've just texted me and they're lying in bed? Are they, going to harm themselves? They're going to hurt themselves? All this sort of stuff. So I think having good, solid, practical boundaries for young people, like not even like just setting boundaries around use of social media, what you're consuming, not just the food we're consuming, but like how much we engage with social media, how much we text. Like Christine was saying, just the practical boundaries around all of that stuff.
And our own practices. We have to do mindfulness. We have to have our outlets. So whether it's gym or dancing,
Gym's
going out on the
definitely
weekend.
Shout out to you.
Yeah. For me, it's reggae. That's where I lose
right.
myself. It's
That's my thing too.
so right. We all have to have our escape. Unfortunately, we see people having other escapes that further add to the trauma and the mental health problems. We need to be conscious of that, and everyone has addictions. We all have them in different shapes or forms. We just have to manage them and balance them then with some good practices.
And there's a lot of ideas now around like self-care. We throw it around like we should care for ourselves, and there's
Have a
like
bath.
yeah, like it's commercialized ideas of what self-care looks like, but we need to take it up a notch and think about self-compassion, and there's a lot of research around that as well, and it's about tuning into the self. So not just doing the practical things before we develop the capacity for actually going and taking that bath and getting ourselves to the gym. It's like actually we have to do the self-compassion part first, feeling within ourselves, what's going on here, what's going on for me, where am I at, what's my capacity like today, has my friend's problem really exhausted me, or am I really carrying excess worry, and then thinking, or am I carrying negative self-talk, and then kind of responding to yourself and just asking yourself the question, would I say this to my friend? Would I say the stuff I'm saying to myself? Like that whole idea of when you say, just push yourself some more, just do more. Or, just kind of, we blur our own boundaries sometimes by, giving more to others and exhausting ourselves. So self-compassion, I think, is such a, if we can learn more about it and start practicing it.
And the spiritual self, I think people of faith have that, and that's such a source of self, looking after the self through connecting with your faith and finding strength there. But not everyone has that, or that's also been damaged from their experiences or their trauma. So seeing the self as multidimensional in all aspects of the self, the body, the mind and the spirit or heart, soul.
It was very interesting, something that was mentioned in terms of like social media nowadays, and how that's like drastically changed the landscape of being able to deal with a lot of emotional issues, emotional problems, right? Because when we talk about boundaries and how a lot of things are getting blurred and how you're aware of just everything that's going on in everyone's life, essentially, how do you also now kind of navigate that space where you can kind of see some things that are a little bit alarming, and how do you kind of intervene when it's not necessarily someone coming to you and it's something that you're seeing that is potentially alarming? And maybe if you guys want to talk from any experiences potentially as well, but also what kind of like guidelines or advice do you guys give in that kind of
Social media queen here.
essentially how do you intervene when you can see something really?
I think one of the things one of the examples I can give is young people coming to me saying they're worried about friends because they've seen them post something really, that just an expression of their real low mood or distress, or a high level of distress that they're, worried about them. And I've always gone back to you have to get some help from other people in that instance where you're worried. You have to alert someone else, either at school, like if you're worried about another student, you have to alert an adult. And you're still protecting yourself, but I think it is harder with young people as well because they want to not disclose to teachers and but I think you absolutely have to protect yourself because otherwise you're just sitting there consuming all the things. Like for example, one of the ways I protect myself personally is because I've survived war myself and my family have gone through a lot of difficulties. I don't sit late at night anymore and watch war footage. I don't the news, but also just social media accounts that are campaigns for helping the poor people, helping refugees, and before you know it, you're seeing really traumatic material. You're just scrolling, and so that kind of I think mindful consumption is important, and that because it's so easy to just mindlessly scroll and you're triggered. So one of the ways I protect myself is to know my triggers, know what, like I don't want to watch war stuff at 1 o'clock in the morning,
And also I think not to intervene all the time. I think you have to give yourself permission not to. If someone invites you in to support them as well or to guide them, then you do. I think it's easy if you care a lot to want to then intervene a lot, whether it's on social media or in real life. If the invitation's not there or the openness is not there, you'll get resistance, and then you'll have a lot of other dramas to deal with. So I think for me, it's always, will this comment, if I respond to something, is it going to be wanted, or is there openness in these people or whoever it is to then receive what I have to offer or not? And sometimes you know that it's not really, and it's driven by your need, which was what you was saying earlier. Whose need are you trying to meet? So sometimes you just have to step back, observe.
That's actually so true. We don't always have to intervene.
Right.
Sometimes it's like, I hope someone, can do something about this.
Right.
It's hard as a caring person. There's a lot of people, good
Absolutely.
people out there that, they want to stop or prevent anything from happening, right? Just quickly going back to the self-care and doing the things that we love, what are some more practical things that people can do, to improve how they feel?
Sorry, quickly as well. It would be nice to also hear what personal.
If you guys are there.
Yeah, if there's anything that
I'll start off. I normally get a massage, what I mean? I love.
Talk about the nails.
Nah, I get nails done. I get, like, on my day off, I literally. Oh, it's back today. Don't worry about it.
Wrong color for the season.
The podcast.
For me, that's all I like. I'm all about self-care, looking after yourself, looking after your body, exercise, all those things, right? I guess you guys can also add more to the list. But yeah, I would love to hear some answers.
Sorry, just going back a little bit, just to like how you guys were talking about like boundaries and also just like knowing when to intervene. Because I know personally, like I am a giver, like you said, I'm an empath or all those, all those terms that we use nowadays. But like, and that's something that I struggled with. Can I ask questions?
Yeah, that's crazy.
So,
Nice.
I just know, like, what do you do, like, when, you have been invited into that space, where someone wants you to intervene, like, they're letting out how they feel or their situation, but it's like, you do then offer, because you realize you don't have the capacity to actually deal with their situation properly, and it's like, you offer them counselling or therapy, and you do offer them a ride, to the hospital, but it's like they completely, like, just refuse to do any of those things, but yet they're still kind of, like, wanting you there. You know what I mean? Like, what do you do then? Because, like, that's, like, I feel like I've been in multiple positions where I'm just like, okay, like, I feel like I've exhausted all options now. Like, what next? Because, like, I still want to help, but, like, clearly, like, I'm not really helping the way that, like, I guess as much as I probably should be or want to be. Like, like, it's not really effective.
You're doing all the work and they're
really.
not participating. We can only help people if they're participating in that process. So I can't help young people unless we're working in partnership. It's a collaboration, and it's even that with your friends. Sometimes you have to name it. You have to be like, I'm really trying to help you here, but you're not meeting me halfway, or like, I can't do any more than I've done. I need you to do this with me so we can, help you through this. And if they're not willing to, you actually have to back out. Because sometimes people are always going to do that. They're going to be reeling you in, and they're going to be getting you to do all the work. You're going to be carrying it. They might get some relief from that, right? But you're left with that heaviness and that responsibility. It's very hard. It gets easier when you get older. It's for all of you. There's something magical that happens when you're in your 30s and 40s and 50s. So absolutely it gets a bit easier. But it's tough, and sometimes you'll lose friendships because those people are not really willing to do their part in it. And we have different personalities, and trauma really, especially early childhood trauma, creates personality traits. And you will know certain people in your lives that have these personality traits that are really difficult to deal with. They're manipulative, they're demanding. It's really hard. They need really some professional support to help them understand how that impacts all aspects of their lives. And as a friend, you just have to be aware of it and have your boundaries real tight.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I guess it goes back to like boundaries, because like that's something that I've really been like trying to uphold in my life personally, with my friends, family and everyone, and just like seeing the importance of that. Because then like going back to like self-care then, because I'm like, how can I really care for myself if I don't have those boundaries out? So yeah, it's really good. Thank you.
Yeah, no,
I think
thanks for the
also,
question.
I think becoming okay with the idea that friendships and connections do rupture. That there will be ruptures in your relationships when you set boundaries, and people, you know, there'll also be repairs, and sometimes it is hard for people to receive your boundaries. That's the other thing, that whilst you're doing the boundary work and someone else isn't, they're not. They don't want your boundaries. It
doesn't work
because
for
they
them.
want to take. They want to take more from you.
Yes.
So it's like they're going to take it hard, and there might be a rupture. But you just have to be your kind, warm self and say, I'm setting this boundary with you because I'm doing this for me, and it might be hard for you to receive this boundary. It might be hard for me for you to hear these words, but I'm doing them for this reason, and that can sometimes be enough to kind of, you know, leave with a friend, and that friend might go, hey, you know what? I was thinking about what you said the other day, and you know, maybe I did ask for too much, or maybe I didn't, you know, step up and do the work with you. You know, you were carrying me quite a lot, you know. So it might just take a bit of time for them to reflect. Not everyone reflects back.
Yeah. And some will not be repaired. And that's just, you know, you outgrow
have to be
people.
okay,
You have to sometimes allow those relationships to organically kind of end, or to, you know, not be able to be repaired. But again, like you said, you try. Just I think communication. I think again these things happen really subtly in friendships, but we don't name them. We're scared to name them. So I think just putting words to what you're feeling when that person's doing that. This is making me feel really depleted or really helpless and hopeless. Like I can't help you change, but I realize it's because I feel like I'm doing this stuff and you're not responding. You know, just bring words to it if you can.
Yeah.
You guys really highlighted like just how multifaceted all of this is, and you can't like blanket generalize just how you deal with these things, because what you mentioned in terms of how like certain people, because of the trauma they faced, it really does now start to dictate how their personality is shaped and formed, especially in very formative years, and how we perceive that in terms of how they're acting in some certain situations. They don't realize that it's actually an opportunity to kind of like just to essentially see that this is someone that's dealing with something. We kind of really just look at it like, okay, this is just how they are, and this is not something that we need to step into. That's just someone that doesn't need any help, that doesn't want any help, without realizing like it's a cry for help that person also probably doesn't even realize that they have as well. And it just really shows that it's very it's a complex matter, but it does boil down to very simple human kind of like actions in terms of being that reach out or taking time to understand people. And it kind of made me realize like the education around just being able to pinpoint what something is or what where something is coming from. It's really needed in the community. It's really needed in like individual lives, in schools and things like that as well. Like because it's deep essentially. Like
why aren't we teaching psychology? Why isn't psychology and human behaviour a subject for every high school student? What the hell do we need maths for?
all the mathematicians listening are.
No.
That's actually so.
But why aren't we
talking about
empowering people
relationships
to
and
understand their own
communication?
self and the people around them? It's craziness.
I remember,
No, but also what you're saying about where it comes from and how even those really difficult behaviours people have were at one point protective for them when they were going through their trauma. So compassion, you said the word compassion, and I think if we can stay in a place of compassion and curiosity, even those friends or family members who really push our buttons, to be like, all right, maybe this was what they had to do to survive something, but it's not working right now. So then it gives you a bit of compassion to then not react or respond in a more problematic way, but also then to see if there's a way that it could be addressed or changed.
And that it's helpful for them, and acknowledge that that's how that's what's working for them, but it's not helpful for me. So that's where that start of that boundary work can happen, where you kind of see the
Beautiful.
behaviour, acknowledge that it's a protective mechanism for that person and it's working for them, it's sustaining them in life and their relationships, but it's just not working in the dynamic between you two, and it's not, working for you personally. So, okay, let's
And
start,
the
putting
boundary.
up, and so that's when you can kind of start doing that work.
Yeah, and
When
if it's not serving you, then you
Not
can be
serving.
like, give yourself permission. I can step back from this relationship, a bit of distance. You may not break the friendship, but you may see them a bit less often. You may not drive them every time or everywhere. That you start to then create that because it doesn't serve you. And we can only serve others if we do really do that and serve ourselves first, and then we have capacity to serve others in the community.
I promise we do want to hear what your self-care and what you guys do for when it comes to looking after yourselves. But interesting things like keep popping up. I did hear that exact concept or understanding once as well, like how our brain is so like flexible and able to cope with like adversity in different situations, and we don't realize that it's a protective mechanism sometimes, but that doesn't mean that is something that should be like continued in another setting or another situation in life. Like we still live with the same kind of mentalities that you did mention, did once protect us or frame us in a certain situation, but it doesn't mean it's conducive for another point in time in life and things like that. So being able to understand that and see that in friends is very important as well. But all right, now we do want to hear what are some practical
Nails.
things. What are some practical things that people can do to be able to be there for someone, but still be able to look after themselves at the same time?
Yeah, I think going back to that point I made before about trauma disconnects us from ourselves and our bodies, just mindfulness practices. So that'll be different for everyone. Attunement to your environment, because we're not, how many people walk down the street but never look at the clouds or the sky or the flowers or the birds, right? We're not attuned to the beauty in our environment, in nature. So attunement to the environment, movement, so sport, exercise, dance, yoga, stretching, again, brings us back to the present. There are all these practices we call grounding practices, bring people back to their centre, to their core, to the present moment. They're really important in terms of that, what daily practices. And again, some things don't work for some people. I cannot do breathing meditation. That just can't do it.
Yeah.
But get me on a dance floor and I zone out.
Say no more.
Right? So that's meditation for me. So everyone has to find their own. One young man said to me, I don't feel joy anywhere. Why don't I feel joy or pleasure? So my work with him now is trying to really break it down and help him be attuned to what does the taste of that chocolate bar feel like for you? What the only place he feels happy on the basketball court. That's the only place, has lots of childhood trauma, settlement difficulties, but it's trying to help people find those places and spaces and moments of joy, expand it. So we have to do that for ourselves, but they're the daily kind of things that I encourage young people to do. That's therapy. Talking is coming to counselling or talking to a professional is about facilitating your own process of healing and recovery. So we'll give them ideas, we'll help them make sense, build awareness, but then the practices have to happen on your own the minute you walk out of that counselling room.
Anyone else? Any other?
Yeah, I think all of those things. All of
the above.
All of the above. But I think it's, I know I've mentioned triggers, but anything that it's like getting to know ourselves better. I think one of the best things we can do is to really learn the things that actually upset us, trigger us, bring fear in us, worry, what those things are. Because for some of us, we haven't learnt that as kids, especially with around parents that might have been traumatised and that intergenerational trauma impacting the next generation. You might not have had a caregiver model that to you and co-regulate with you, which is to, teach you how to kind of calm down when you're really heightened or when you're feeling fear or when you're anxious. And so I think the best form of self-care is to learn more about our bodies. It took me a long time. I had an intuition for a long, long time. I was very intuitive. I would be like, my body would react to things. I'd be like, oh, that feels like odd, or that conversation wasn't comfortable. It took me into my 20s. early 20s where I was like, oh, that's my intuition and it always kicks in and I just don't listen to it. And it was through conversations and reading more about it that it was like, oh, actually the best work I ever did was to tune into my own intuition. So I think the more we get to know ourselves, we'll understand what heightens us, what actually brings out that fear and that fight-flight response in us if we've had trauma or we've had parents with trauma, and then what do we need to come down from that state? And it looks different for all of us. And for some people, it's not safe to get into their body and do that breathing yet. It might be something that's removed from the body for a while until they, you just got to try the different things. But my dad would escape into his music. He'd either listen to it or we'd play it, and he would just zone out. And I think without realising, he modelled that there was a coping mechanism that was so healthy and so beautiful, and I didn't really click at the time. And I was like, oh, actually, all these years later, I'm noticing, he just knew himself that well. And if we could all kind of, get to know ourselves better, self-care would look different for everyone.
For sure. Yeah. And self-care is self-soothing.
It's
It is about how do we
self-soothing. It
soothe
really
the
is.
distress, the internal distress, both at the mind and body level, because that's where, again, trauma is remembered in the body, and there's a lot of books that write about that. And so even if you think, well, I'm not stressed, your body, like if you're doing this, like my dad who's 83 and, has his own trauma from those early years, and it's like, that's still in your body, 83 years on. And why do you have an ouzo every night, a little glass of ouzo every night, every day, right? That's self-medication.
Yeah.
So it's just being aware of the body and finding healthy ways to self-soothe.
100%. Do you guys have anything to add to that list?
I know for sure my faith helps me.
Could you speak to that more? I'd love to hear
My
a
faith?
bit more about how faith, how faith gives you strength.
Just touching on what you said, I feel like recently I've just been, evaluating, analysing my reactions to certain situations. And so right now I'm focused on really practicing the fruits of the Spirit. So I really want to delve into that and try to practice that every day, which is like love, patience. Patience is a very big one. That's really been helpful. Letting my problems all up to God and He'll take care of that. I know that for sure. One thing that I do find important is taking advantage of the day. So I feel like when I used to have like borderline insomnia, my thought process was a bit different during the night. It felt a little bit too dark, and I know that when I'm out and about during the day, in the morning, appreciating nature especially, and always showing gratitude always helps for me. Yeah.
Yeah, so myself as well, my faith, kind of just trusting in God and like realizing, sometimes I'm someone who likes to just know how things are gonna go. You know what I mean? Like I'm such a planner. Like I got a diary, I got a calendar. I can do this. Like I know how things are gonna go. So it's like when things don't go off, like kind of go off the path that I think it's gonna go, I'm just like, damn, like what? Like I kind of get stressed through that. But like kind of just trusting that God. Like trusting God's plan for my life, and just I may not know how things are gonna go, but just knowing that He has like set a plan for me. So that's how kind of my faith plays into it. I also like to journal a lot. A lot of things happening in my mind. So whether it's the start of the day or at night, just kind of like letting that all out. And I always find like after I do that, like after I kind of just like a brain dump pretty much, I just feel some more like just relaxed and everything. I just light a candle, got some instrumental jazz playing in the background and just writing it out. Like that always helps me. Also going to the beach, especially during lockdown, that helped me so much. Like, because lockdown was just, whew. Oh my God. Like that was just a whole thing. So that like leaving my room, which became like my study area, my workplace, like everything. Just leaving that space and just going, just watching the waves, listening to music, walking on the sand, like that was just really soothing. And I guess grounding myself, kind of how you said, like just really noticing the waves, noticing like the clouds. I'm a sunset babe, so I was just watching that. It was good. Yeah, just kind of taking in the nature and like what God has created really. So that really helps me as well.
You go to the beach in winter as well? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I was rugged up. But,
Can you imagine that? Go to the beach with a coat.
yeah.
Locals from their balcony are like, what?
I mean, it wasn't just me. It was a few couple people too. So.
Yeah. It's like, you too? Oh.
I'm like, yeah, I know.
I know. Nah,
That's pretty
really
awesome.
good.
Yeah, I think for me, definitely faith is something that's kind of grounded me in those kind of situations as well. But I guess for in a practical sense, it's allowing me to kind of look at things in a higher level kind of view, in terms of removing myself from like having my situations and problems right in front of me to like, all right, let's try to get some kind of a bird's eye view look on what is really going on. How much is this impacting other things that I'm, not paying attention to because I'm too busy looking at this situation right in front of me? Or like, okay, in the long run, how much do I really believe this is going to impact X, Y, Z? Am I overreacting? Am I underreacting? All those kind of things and that. And like, I think when I really take that kind of high level view, it really does bring me back into the situation in a different kind of perspective or different kind of understanding in that kind of sense. So yeah, it's interesting to hear how people,
Right,
look at
but
things in
they're
different
skills.
ways.
Like, again, they're the kinds of skills we teach young people through CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, or, there's all sorts of things which you do probably intuitively or you've learnt to do. So I think that's the other thing, that people already do a lot that they don't realise are skills. But there are a lot of young people that don't even know to do that, to distance themselves from the problem and get a different perspective or bring in other perspectives. So I think that's the thing. There's a lot of skills that you all have that, again, you can share with each other. Because when you have these conversations, someone else will be like, oh, all right, I could do that, or I might do that next time.
100%. And I think as a friend, it's also our job to point out to that as well. Sometimes, this guy's good at something, but he doesn't notice it. He's just so used to doing it.
Right.
I have to point out and say, bro, you're actually really good at this. Right. So I feel like that 100%. Yeah. I want to dive a little bit more into the resources that's available.
Yeah, I was also going to say, like, a lot of like, these are the skills we teach, these are the things we teach. I'm like, okay, we're hearing about all these different things. How do we get to that?
Where do we find them?
Right. You want me to go? Do you want? Yeah. So in terms of, I guess, referrals, so I'll start with that. If people actually do want to speak with someone, again, like I said, start with a safe personal place. A lot of young people don't have a good GP, unfortunately, but a GP is a good point of starting point to get a mental health care plan, which then allows them to access counselling in the public system. There are a lot of different services for different subgroups as well. So Foundation House, as mentioned, is for people of refugee and asylum seeker backgrounds. We can't work with other migrant groups. That's just our funding. That's our core business. It's a free service. For other services, there are lots of free services. Headspace, other local community health centres, mental health services. I think the starting point should just be to ask one of them. Like if someone comes to Foundation House, they'll go through an intake. If we're not the right service for them, we will link them to the right service. And I think that's what other services would also do. In terms of online as well, though, platforms now, Headspace and others have got a lot of information online for young people. Kids Helpline, Lifeline, like we mentioned. Where else?
You mentioned Blue Knot.
Blue Knot Foundation. And I think we are going to provide a list, which we will then forward to you guys, which you can then post at some point. I think we're doing that together.
That'd be great,
Sometimes it's helpful to just get familiar with your local council. So just, like we're in the city of Greater Dandenong, so just on that website there's youth services, and it's a good starting point for youth to even see what's available to them, whether it's, social groups or individual support. You can kind of see a list of things, and at least it's a more gentle way of kind of just seeing what's out there without committing or without jumping into it. So that might be a way of even passing that information on to friends, just some links or social media accounts from Kids Helpline and Lifeline and things like that, where they can just look up some key information about, symptoms or that sort of stuff.
And all these programs, any kind of program that is for young people, again, is going to improve mental health. So if someone's interested in music, like whenever we hear about those programs, we just send those, email or a link, art programs, whatever people. I think it's about also, again, seeing it as well-being. that it's not just mental health? How can we just encourage people to participate and find whatever environment or activity is going to work for them?
I know we probably have to wrap it up soon, but I do have one last question. Can you talk a little bit about the success with Afghan community that you've been working with?
Our program, we developed the program in August. So August last year. So as the crisis happened in Afghanistan, to date there've been like more than 2,000 people who've been evacuated. So our agency got the funding from the government, and we developed a program to respond to those needs. And so I think success-wise, we've had. I don't have the figures on me, but we've run so many groups. We've started, so one of the things we did was to develop information sessions around what our service does, what mental health might look like, or emotional wellbeing might look like, just for people to even acknowledge or notice what might be happening for them, and to normalise that experience that on arrival, you're on survival. You're like I've just lost my job, my house, everything. Might have left half my family there. And so you're just in survival mode. But alongside it, you are going to experience some of those, ruminations and worries and all these things that are symptoms of trauma. And so we just provided these information sessions for people to just start checking in with themselves. And it was a really nice, warm way for people to understand that this service exists, because they might not have had it back home, or they might not have even seen a support service like that back home. And then they would be, then we would come in as one of our counsellors. We would talk about, what the individual counselling might look like. And so we had lots of people self-refer. At the moment, we've got another group with our community project workers. They're doing an Afghan wellbeing group that's in partnership with another agency in the southeast. So they're doing women's wellbeing. So they're talking about all sorts of key ideas, and they've got different themes every session. We've successfully run a program for getting your learner's license. So our community project workers were delivering the information in the book all in Dari in their first language. So out of those people, 24 out of 25 in the first round all got their learners.
And they were women, right?
Most of them were women. There were
Who have
it was
no
a mixed
rights
group,
in
but
Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And to get your license here and to be
crazy.
independent,
So-
right?
25 to 25. That
Absolutely.
25th person's
Yeah.
close.
They just pulled up. They came late. They just came late.
I'm not sure if they didn't go for it. That's because I don't know if they just
Surely.
they're just waiting it out.
No, they like this so much, they want to do it twice.
But we had, what was beautiful was one day I walked past just to get coffee, and one of the workers said to me, "Oh, that man that's he was just sitting, just kind of chilling at the back of the class," and they said, "Oh, that guy passed his test very early on, but now he brings his wife, and he just chills up the back of the class." It was so beautiful that this man was not only achieved this for himself, but was then supporting his partner. So there's all these beautiful moments that come out of it that just really just pull at the heartstrings. It's beautiful. So we've had lots of groups. We've seen lots of clients for individual counselling. We've tried to make it as streamlined as possible and as easily accessible as possible. So we've actually we've got a list from Settlement Services. So we actually reach out to clients that don't have to be referred. We've tried to kind of make sure no one falls through the gaps, which is quite unique to the program. So we're reaching out to them, telling them about our service, all those things, having those initial conversations, letting them know we're here, we're doing it all with interpreters or in first language if we've got the resources. So it's pretty cool stuff. It's just bigger and bigger, really, and we're doing lots of partnerships with other agencies in the southeast, which makes it really a whole lot richer, I think.
And not everyone needs counselling. I think the beauty of doing these kind of varied programs is that psychoeducation for some people is enough. Then they are aware of what's going on inside of them, and they have the skills or the resources to deal with it. These programs which restore meaning, purpose, dignity,
Safety, agency, all
independence,
things.
control of your life.
Kind of
they're
plays right
healing,
back into that, yeah.
Yeah.
So then from all of that, there may be some people who are struggling more,
Yeah.
who do need a little bit more support, individual counselling. Some people might need psychiatric help, again, if their mental health is on the severe end of that spectrum. So, you try and offer lots of different things that will meet people where they're at and what they need.
That's amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Before we wrap things up, do you guys have any questions or anything you want to say?
Not questions, no.
It would be interesting to hear what's coming up next. What can we look out for as well, though?
I don't know. Should we tell them? I don't know.
I mean, if you want to give us an exclusive,
Say it after when the camera's off. Like, tell us.
what can you share? What can people look out for in terms of the activities and what this campaign is going to entail essentially as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of briefly talked about it
Yeah,
already
for sure.
anyway. Like how we already started doing the school programs, kind of that's kind of starting, yeah. And then also we have a tournament at the end of the year, so tryouts are actually coming up soon. So if you have a team,
We have to try out.
I mean, yeah, listen, last year it was actually so big last year
That's
that
so sick.
people were left out. You know what I mean? Like people actually felt
yeah,
like, oh damn, like I wish I got my team together. So if you're an individual who wants to participate, or if you have a team as well, team of 8, you can come through. Also, the women are joining in this time as well.
Yeah, let's go.
So we're promoting inclusivity like all around the
Love that.
around the board.
Yeah.
So it should be good. It should be amazing. We're really excited to see what will come out of it. And I guess like just reiterating like the connections, especially post lockdown, we saw a lot of those connections break down. So we're just kind of come together as a community and just really flesh that out.
We also have a media event.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
We might be having a kids event as well. So then our last big event towards November.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the plan.
And
Plenty happening.
socials, where can people follow Shoot a Shoot?
On Instagram.
If we do our job well, it'll come up on
It
the
will come
screen.
up.
Right here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
so
we
we
have a
mainly use
YouTube channel.
Instagram.
I don't know.
Yeah, we mainly use Instagram as
Yeah.
our platform. We do have like Twitter. As you can see, like with the social media campaign, we'll have like a Twitter room as well on there with like a lot of other professionals speaking as well on mental health, emotional well-being. Yeah.
Yeah, that's our last outlet. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, like I guess Instagram is probably the one to go to straight away. Yeah.
And same for you guys. Yeah, where can people
Website
connect, plug in?
mostly, probably the website for information. Referrals, again, that's something people can refer a friend or family member. They can refer themselves. It's all on the website. That's probably the best place to
We're
go.
on Facebook.
We are on Facebook, but it's a
probably
bit
not that.
ordinary.
No one uses
It's a bit
Facebook.
ordinary.
But we have sometimes we have cool videos in other languages. I'd still
Go
definitely
to
We'll check
Go
out
to
your
Facebook,
Facebook.
guys. I'm talking to the camera right now. Go to Facebook.
I feel like we need to get on Insta, but
Oh, yeah, jump on Insta is good.
Definitely.
just don't have enough hours in my day, otherwise I'll take up that portfolio person.
No, for sure.
Before Noah does the
I was going to
outro-
say, it's not going to be right if Noah doesn't sign us
it
out.
has to be right. He does an intro as well. Thank you so much for jumping on.
Yeah, for
This
sure.
has been
Thank
very
you.
educational for us
Thank
and
you.
for the listeners as well. Shout out to Shoot a Shoot.
Yeah.
This is such an amazing opportunity for us as well.
Yeah.
All right.
Amazing.
Shout out to Sagali as well, man, in the background like that.
Made
Hey.
this happen. Thank
Nah,
you.
If our
appreciate
camera
you.
could move, we'll show him, but
I'm dead.
All right, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Disruption Podcast. Thank you to Foundation House. Thank you to Shoot a Shoot.
Thank you.
Love you guys very much. Peace out. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, do all those things. Share
Make
this
sure
with
you
somebody
do
as
that.
well. And do some self-care. No.
Self-care.
What was the other term? Compassion.
Compassion.
Do that this week. All right, peace out.
Latest.